Hi, I'm Peter Lazaroff, and I'm joined today by Sara Gelsheimer. Sara, you and I both have two kids. Life is crazy. We've also advised a lot of young professionals. What are some of the things that you like to coach people on who are planning to have children?
Yeah, there are obviously lots of expenses that come with a baby or two. And I would say really the first piece to start looking into when you're thinking about having a baby is health insurance. Obviously, health insurance in general can be very costly. So if you can look at your plan and compare it to your spouse's plan and have a good idea of whose health insurance would cover having a child, that's step one, I would say. And then I would say in terms of, you're a lucky one. You didn't have to wear any maternity clothes, right? So let me just tell you, they're expensive. So I would say, when you do become pregnant, spending money on a few key pieces of maternity clothes is essential, but try to borrow the rest or get used. Because obviously it's only for a short amount of time. So there's no need to spend a ton of money on a whole maternity wardrobe. And then I would also say, just along the lines of taking care of yourself during pregnancy, invest in a dang sleep pillow. They're freaking expensive, but it's well worth it. Massages if you have, back and feet aches. Invest the money in things that are going to make you feel better during those 9 months that can be very, very challenging. But outside of pregnancy, I would say, I know this is something you actually did, Peter, was setting up a separate account that you can start funneling money to get you used to living with some of those outside, without the money coming in, so you can start planning for some of those expenses. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Well, I've always felt like the most common question we get is how do you save for a kid, or how much is it going to cost to raise a kid? And I sort of kiddingly say, but it's really true. Like, however much you make, that's how much it's going to cost to raise a kid. And whether you're making $1 million or $50,000, a large chunk of your income is going to go to raising the child, and how much discretionary income will really determine the luxuries that you provide for the child. And I know for my wife and I, we had a pretty good savings rate before having children. And I feel like the big difference in our finances was mostly our savings rate went down. We still saved for those core retirement goals. But one thing we tried to do to get used to it was, upon the day she was pregnant, we knew we were going to be sending kids to daycare. We just opened up an account and we just put $100 the first couple months in, just to get used to having a little less cash flow. And then we also had a buffer for when the baby came, if there was any major expense we had overlooked in the process. And after a few months, we bumped that up to 200 and 300. And daycare for us was about $1,500 a month. So it was not cheap. But just getting used to that process, plus already setting aside some savings, was really helpful to us. And I know that we often, both you and I, coach our clients to go down that path. Because literally, when you become a parent for the first time, you have no idea what you're doing. Or at least I shouldn't speak for you. I had no idea what we were doing. And even when you go through something like a baby registry, when you're registering for a wedding, you understand what the pots and pans are that you're registering for. But when you're registering for a baby, I found myself, I was just checking boxes online or in the store based on what it said was recommended or what it sounded like. We had no idea. So, with that in mind, I'm not sure what your experience is like, but I'm kind of curious, where do you think people should be directing their spending as they're preparing for children?
Yeah, that is an excellent question. And actually, just friends who have come to me for advice, one of the things that I say most often is you don't need to buy 27 contraptions for your baby to sleep in or lay in, for the first 6 months of their life. I mean, truthfully, there's like a Mamaroo, a Rock and Play, a Snoogle, a baby, a boppy. I mean, it's crazy. And so you can get totally caught up in buying all these different things. And you know what? There's the secret that somebody did tell me, thankfully. Babies are all different. So one baby may love, the Rock and Play, and the other one might not. And so if you can borrow those things, it's great. I mean, for example, my second child had acid reflux, and a friend swore that that a Mamaroo, saved her baby, prevented her from having her acid reflux problem. So she let me borrow it, and then those things are several $100s. You know what? Nora hated it. I was like, oh, thank goodness. I'm so glad I was able to borrow instead of spending money. So I would say, borrow as much as you can. Sure, invest in maybe one or two of those things that you don't need. So that would be one of my pieces of advice on there. Same with maternity clothes. I mean, babies go through so many clothes, you know this. I mean, they spit up
Yes.
within minutes. And so, buy used clothes. There are some great options here in St. Louis for places to get nice used baby clothing. So what would I spend money on? I spend money on anything that's going to make my life easier, truthfully. So one thing I really wish I would have spent earlier on is paying for sleep advice. Because as you know, with being a parent of two small children as well, like that is the hardest part. It was for me anyway, the lack of sleep. So pay for things like getting sleep advice, extra sheets so that in the middle of the night you can do a quick swap. We invested in some waterproof pads that we can just lay on the changing table instead of, replacing the whole thing every time. So little conveniences like that are where we found that spending our money was well worth it. And then, in addition to that, if you think you're going to have more children, investing in a few things that can be used from child to child is also probably a good use of funds as well.
Yeah, we lucked out because we have two boys. So like when we buy our 7-year-old a ski jacket, we know that the 3-year-old is going to be wearing that ski jacket 4 years from now. And I love one of the things you said about trying to find things that just make life easier, saving yourself time. One of the books that Sara, I talk about all the time called Happy Money, The Science of Happier Spending, talks about like different types of spending that you can actually derive scientifically proven happiness from. And those are one of those categories is things that save you time. And I think when you are dealing with the juggle of raising a family and advancing a career, those purchases that maybe look indulgent, but you can afford and would absolutely make your life easier and save you a little bit of time. I could not agree more. I think we had a harder time making those choices with the first child, feeling maybe a little bit guilty about it. But with the second, things get really crazy. It seemed like a no-brainer. But you actually wrote a really good article on preparing for baby finances, and we'll be sure to link it below. But maybe just to close us out here, what are some actionable steps people should be taking away from this conversation?
Sure. I think honestly, the first thing to do would be, what you guys did. Set up a separate account and start, putting money towards it. That's going to help you not only cover the cost of these, all these contraptions you're going to have to buy, but it's also going to help you get used to paying the large expensive daycare. That's the route you're going to go. Obviously, checking, your company benefits, not just for healthcare, but also see if you have a dependent care flex savings account or even a healthcare FSA. So those are ways to spend money on childcare and healthcare tax-free. And then, obviously there are a lot of other advanced estate planning things you should consider, like bumping up life insurance, getting estate documents in order, and eventually starting to think about planning for education, so putting money into a 529. So those are all the things I would suggest starting to think about if you're considering a baby in the near future.
That's wonderful. Thanks so much, Sara. And if you want to learn more about Plancorp, you can email us at info@plancorp.com. We also developed a real short quiz. You can go to startmyplan.com. It's just 9 simple questions. And then we use that questions to send you information and our best insights tailored specifically to your place in life right now. Thanks so much for watching. Talk to you all soon.